Good afternoon. We're ready to begin. So session three of the Equity, Excellence, and E-Learning is about to begin. This webinar series is brought to you today by the National Center for Urban School Transformation at San Diego State University in San Diego, California. This series will highlight essential teaching skills and emphasize how they can be adapted and applied by educators providing remote classroom instruction. Opinions and content of this presentation that are of our featured speakers may not necessarily be a direct representation of NCUST. This webinar is being recorded. As a courtesy to our speakers and your fellow audience members, please remain muted and do not share your video during the presentation. A copy of today's recording, presentation slides, and resources will be shared on our website, ncust.com. And thank you so much and enjoy the webinar.
Hello and welcome. My name is Joe Johnson. I serve as the Executive Director of the National Center for Urban School Transformation, InQUST. Since 2005, InQUST has been identifying amazing elementary, middle, and high schools that generate great learning results for all demographic groups of students. Not surprisingly, we found the same impressive teaching practices throughout these schools. In our current situation, we need to find ways to apply those essential teaching practices in remote learning environments to ensure equity and excellence for all students we have the privilege to serve. We believe the teaching practices we've witnessed in InQUST award-winning schools can be applied in ways that make online learning more powerful and more effective for diverse populations of students. While our nation should applaud educators for their amazing efforts to adapt quickly to the realities of the pandemic, we know students did not benefit equitably. Emergency remote teaching is not the same as planned distance learning. To that end, we are pleased to introduce you to our Equity, Excellence, and E-Learning webinar series, which will highlight each practice in the book Teaching Practices from America's Best Urban Schools, 2nd edition, and discuss practical ways educators can apply them in online instructional delivery. When we visit high-performing schools, we always interview students. At one school, a student explained, at my other school, it was like they wanted us to learn it, but they didn't want us to learn it. It was like you had to guess to figure out what they wanted you to do. You had to try to read their minds. Here, the teachers make it real for us, so what you're learning makes sense. You don't have to read the teacher's mind to figure out what you're supposed to be learning. In today's session, we'll focus on the practice of promoting clarity. In great schools, teachers work hard to ensure that their students have clarity about what students need to learn, how their teachers are leading them to learn it, and how students can know when they have learned it well. Clarity is in the eye of the beholder. And in our schools, in our classrooms, that means that we want each student to be clear about what it is that they need to learn, about how the teacher is guiding them toward learning it, and how that student can know when they have learned it well. One of the world's most prolific educational researchers, John Hattie, found that teacher clarity had a stronger effect on student achievement than socioeconomic factors or even parental involvement. If we as educators can increase the extent to which students are clear about what we want them to learn, we can multiply the likelihood that all of our students will succeed. We can do this in face-to-face instruction, but as we're going to see today, we can also do this in online learning. So we're so pleased to bring this session to you today.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce to you, there's so much material that she needs to cover, is Dr. Shirley Peterson. She's an executive coach at Encuster and also a former teacher, principal, and a district leader. She will be moderating this webinar. Thank you so much, Shirley.
Hello, everyone. So as Ruby told you, I'll just add a few more things about my career in education. I served at 2 high schools, one in a high-performing community where students seemingly were successful, but then looking deep into data, there were groups of students who were not achieving excellence in the way that we wanted them to. So there was much work to do there. And in my second principalship at a low-performing school, I found lots of work to do, some similar to the first school, but in the second school, there was much more to do to ensure that all students, including second language learners and special ed students, were achieving equity and excellence. My last position that I held at a district was as an instructional leader, which was analogous to being an area superintendent, supervising principals, providing professional development for them, and implementing district-wide initiatives. So I'm so happy to be the moderator for today's webinar, and we're fortunate to have with us today the principal of Deanda Elementary Schools in Houston, Texas, Lauren Melhoy, and 2 of her teachers, Jacqueline LaRosa and Hillary Smith. Deanda, so very proud to announce, earned a gold award during our recent virtual award ceremony. Like every one of our nearly 170 winning schools, Deanda achieved multiple very impressive successes for every demographic group they serve. From InCUS work in districts across the country, we know many schools struggle with academic success for English learners. Deanda English learners comprises 64% of the school's population. On the 2019 Texas State Assessment, their English learners scored 94% in math, 90% in reading, 80% in writing, and 88% in science. Ladies, we're so thrilled that you've agreed to join us today to share your beliefs, practices, and ways in which you have been able to create such outstanding outcomes for all of your students. Continuing with your focus on equity and excellence, we are all eager to hear how you are engaging students through distance learning, specifically today, as we address the teaching practice of promoting clarity. And what is the practice and what that practice can look like in a virtual classroom. I'll come back to you in just a few minutes so that our audience can hear about your work. I'd like to echo Joe's sentiments. The truth is, the same teaching practices we've observed over and over again in diverse high-performing schools are still relevant and can be adapted to all learning environments. I'm sure that even when schools return to our traditional brick and mortar experiences for students, that there will be some evidence that we need to hold on to our learnings from this distance learning environment. So the session today, as Dr. Johnson said, is a companion to our blog. Why didn't you just tell us what you wanted us to learn? We will also learn how a school principal supports teachers to deliver engaging and effective instruction, working with them through the medium of technology. And as we have found, there's compelling evidence that students are likely to perform at high levels when teachers decide what to teach, primarily based on what they have determined students need to understand and master at their grade levels and subject areas. Students are much more likely to thrive academically when synchronous and asynchronous lessons are designed not merely to follow a pacing guide, but to maximize each student's understanding of critical academic concepts. I recently listened to a talk by Dr. Anthony Muhammad. He's the author of many books. One, Overcoming the Achievement Gap, and the Practice of Promoting Clarity came to my mind. In his talk, he used an analogy about the all-you-can-eat buffet. And I thought about the student quoted in our blog when he said, it was like you had to guess to figure out what they wanted you to do. I believe Dr. Muhammad's analogy of eating at a buffet is relevant here. Teachers may provide all sorts of information, then leave it to the students to decide what they are supposed to do to learn and what parts of the buffet they want to or can eat. Researchers have found that skillful teachers are clear about what they want students to learn. They're clear about what achievement means and clear about what they are going to do to help students attain it. Skillful teachers lead students to the buffet and assure that no one leaves hungry or malnourished. They season their lessons with changes to the curriculum because they know what their students need and the best way they like to learn. They know what their students can and will eat at the buffet. They provide small group and one-on-one instruction, helping students understand. They actually put the food on the plates of some students, then help them chew up the lesson in small pieces. They make sure every student feels connected to what they are learning. The seasonings taste good and are familiar to them, and all of their students leave full, knowing what was intended for them to learn, and they know the language of the buffet, that critical vocabulary, and can measure for themselves how well they have eaten. In schools where the outcomes for students are off the chart, we consistently see these things around the practice of promoting clarity. They help students discuss how, by the end of the lesson, they should be able to compare and contrast traits of a story's main character as an example. They enhance students' clarity about the concepts that they want them to learn by providing diagrams, charts, other visual representations of the concept. They utilize data from prior student assessments to anticipate possible misconceptions and deliberately design lessons to prevent or minimize misconceptions. They teach students strategies for assessing the quality of their work and ensure that learning and ensure that their learning is successful. So I'd like to go now to our panel, and they will focus on how they are applying the practices of a virtual world of teaching and learning. And I'd like to start with Jacqueline. Let's have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about the students that you're teaching, and then I will pose a question for you.
I'm Jacqueline La Rosa, and I'm the 5th grade math teacher at the Yanda Elementary School. And I'm also the present lead teacher of our grade level.
All right, so my question for you is, what are the important learning steps that you planning steps that you take to ensure that your students are clear about what you want them to learn?
Yes, we do careful planning in our lessons, especially on this pandemic time, to make sure that we are covering all our objectives. So first, we prepare our pacing calendar, and we make it into a daily basis. And we usually do this at the beginning of the school year, where the teachers share their thoughts and ideas on how to enrich its unit. In our planning, we carefully analyze its math concept or skill. We identify previous lessons that are connected and needed to develop the new lesson. We also look at the lessons in the previous grade level that were affected in March onward during the rise of the pandemic. We try to incorporate all of this in our pacing calendar, meaning even if they are not a part of our grade level standard objectives, and they are very important skills in developing our new lessons in the grade level, then we need to include them in our teaching. So the next is we also follow the same lesson format in our school, as seen in the slide. First, we start with our preparation. And here we have the number talk or problem of the day, which they used to have during the regular school days, but we try to do it also during this pandemic once in a while. We usually do 3 days on problem of the day and 2 days on number talk. Here, we give the students the opportunity to share their mathematical thinking and reasoning and learn different problem-solving ideas and strategies from each other. Then we have our everyday drill, which is usually the basic facts or operation needed or that will be used in the new lesson. Then we go to our lesson proper, where we have the I do and we do parts. In the I do part, this is where we usually do hands-on activities like shown on that slides. We use manipulatives, concrete models, pictorial models, or use real-life situations to present and develop our new lessons. And to save time on virtual classes, we carefully plan the guiding questions to be used in our class discussions, where students are step-by-step guided on the discovering the rules, the patterns, or the concept on the new lesson. Now, in the we do part, we do a lot of modeling. This is where we use most of our class time. And again, because of the class limited time online, we are very specific to the sample exercises that we need to work on with the students, to make sure that we target all the different areas and expected misconceptions about the lesson. That is from simple and gradually higher level of thinking, from a concept to algorithm or process, then to application to real life situation. And also I want to note in this part, in the we do part, that when we give a problem, we do it one problem at a time, which we check together to ensure immediate unlocking of difficulties or misconceptions. And this is very, very effective in our virtual learning. In our evaluation part, or the you do part, the students do the problem on their own. We also allow them to write their new learning through journal writing and share them in class. We also provide a lot of opportunities for the students to create and share their own story problems that match a given picture or situation. And then later, writing stories to match a given equation. So like the one on the slide, okay, those are student work. We love using those pictures and numbers in the newspaper. If you go back to the previous slide. We love using those pictures and numbers in the newspaper ads to create math stories, to build or develop their communication. We ask them to cut 1, 2, or 3 pictures and create their own story where they can apply their new learning. And for our exit ticket, we do the Convince Me activity, like the one in the picture there, where students reason out if a given situation is reasonable or not. Here, they apply their writing skill together with their math skill. Then we do quick discussions about their answer the following day, and they love to do this. Now, after each online live lesson, we also do small grouping to provide conferencing with the students, to discuss misconceptions, and to help them have a better understanding about the lesson, or sometimes guide them on their daily assignments. And for the fast learners, they love to attend these small sessions because they get more exposure to more higher order thinking level problems. In that slide now, we can see some samples of our students can do. At the end of 5th grade, our students can already write multi-step word problems to match challenging equations like involving parentheses and brackets. We are able to achieve these things and are doing very well because of the continuous collaboration, sharing ideas, and working together among us teachers in our school.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of that information, Jacqueline. So Hillary, let's go to you next. Can you introduce yourself and tell us about the students that you teach?
Hi, my name is Hillary Smith. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Deanda. I've been here for 9 years now, and we just have the best students who are curious and enthusiastic and like all kids, truly.
Okay, so my question for you is, what is it that you are doing? You told me that you were using the inquiry model of teaching. So how are you ensuring your students have clarity about what you want them to learn as you use inquiry to lead them to mastery of your objectives?
So the inquiry-based model that I use and many teachers at our school use, it still has elements of the I do, we do, you do model that Ms. LaRosa was explaining, but it doesn't always go exactly in that order. And the guiding principle is that the students are the ones who are exploring and discovering rather than memorizing information that a teacher has given. So I have found that a shift to inquiry-based instruction in my ELA classroom has really been transformational. And just to explain what that looks like in practice, I have an example for you from some writing composition lessons that I delivered virtually during the first few weeks of this school year. And to give you some context, these lessons were an introduction to the structure of expository writing and building like that positive, safe, welcoming classroom culture as we all got to know each other virtually, because that was really hard with a new group of kids. How do you build that optimal learning environment when you're staring at each other on a screen? So this lesson began with the book Grandma's Purse by Vanessa Brantley Newton, which is just a great mentor text for analyzing characters. And then it led into, it was perfect inspiration for us to write an all about me expository essay in which the kids and the teacher get to share about themselves and get to know each other. So in order to promote the clarity in my writing instruction, I always want to begin with an example or a model or an exemplar. And that's different than the mentor text that we read, because I don't expect my 9-year-olds to write exactly like a published adult author, right? So what I did, first I wrote an all about me essay about myself, Miss Smith, their teacher, and I read it to them. And so this was just, I typed the essay on Microsoft Word, and then I shared it to them during we use Microsoft Teams, but the same as Zoom, I just did the screen sharing feature so that the kids could see it. And then I was thinking, it's also hard sometimes for kids to relate to my adult life. So I wanted them to be even more clear about what I would expect them to be writing. So I wrote another essay, and the kids really knew that I wrote it, but I pretended that I didn't. And so it's the one that you see on the screen. It's this, what I told them was our mystery student wrote this one. And this is their student exemplar that they're seeing before they start writing themselves. So they know where they're going to end up. They don't know how yet, but they know this is the finished piece. Something like this is what they're going to get to. So, what I do is I share this with them, and then I just simply ask them, what do you notice about this writing? And what do you like about this writing? And so that gives kids the opportunity to read, explore, to think, and ask questions and really remember the important parts of the lesson. So rather than me saying, okay, guys, so an effective expository essay, it needs to have an introduction with a central idea, and then you're going to have body paragraphs that are coherent and cohesive, and then you're going to end with a concluding statement. That's really boring. They probably won't remember it. They're discovering these things for themselves. And so, of course, I also have questions prepared ahead of time so I can direct them if they're not immediately noticing the important things that I want them to notice right away, depending on what my objective is. And so the objective here, what I wanted students to learn was that effective expository essays have an introduction, body paragraphs, and a concluding statement. So once I directed their noticing and their questioning and our discussion to that point, I actually wrote that down for them to see. I have a little just virtual instruction tip. It's all about the technology you have, right? So I actually purchased, because at this point we were still working at home, a drawing tablet with a little pen so I can actually write on my Microsoft Word documents or PowerPoints. And that's what you see here in red. So the kids explored first, and then together we came up with that statement about effective expository essays. And so then they can actually see that. So that's the I do part. It just begins with the student exploration first. And then just to make it really super easy and kid friendly, I have this stick figure so they can see the introduction is the hat, and the shoes are the conclusion that you put on at the end. Really just breaking it down to a very elementary level in a way that it's clear and kids will remember. So once they know where they're going, we need the steps on how to get there. So if you can go to the next slide. I told the students, talking about writing process, we always have to start with pre-writing and brainstorming. So we used a circle map here. At our school, we use thinking maps. That's something that's vertically aligned throughout the grade levels and across the contents. So kids know when they see the circle map that they're brainstorming. And we just brainstormed, this was actually in virtual small groups, things that we love. So the kids were yelling these things out to me just with their mics, and I was recording what they were writing. And then if I got pauses, I was asking them more questions like, oh, interesting, you like anime? What about anime? How did you learn about that? And so I'm just writing down everything that they say so they can see what effective brainstorming looks like. And this part is like the most fun. Kids love doing the group brainstorming. And if you can go to the next slide, from that thinking map, we move into our flow map where the kids are taking the details that they came up with, and now they're organizing them. So they're seeing, okay, I am going to have one section that just talks about how I love art, another section about anime, another section about time spent with my cousin. And so as we go through this, I'm modeling, I'm sharing my screen, and students are writing in their notebooks at home. And then if you can go to the next slide. I also wanted to point out that this same inquiry process of noticing is used, I use it for grammar instruction as well, not just writing composition. So what this looks like, and this was done with a document camera. I actually wrote in my physical notebook at home, but then projected it onto my screen through a document camera so the kids could see it. I write that sentence. She bit me, Grandma cried. And that's from the novel we were reading. And then the students copy the sentence down in their notebook, and then they start making a list of everything that they notice about that sentence. So rather than me just telling the students, okay, when you want to show that a character is talking, you have to put quotation marks. It's boring. They might not be engaged. They might not remember that information. They're figuring out for themselves, why is that piece of punctuation there? And once I've directed them to that point, I've written that focus phrase where it's really cemented why they're using the quotation marks. They have a chance to write their own sentences, and then write their own sentences practicing that specific skill. And then later that's a skill we can apply to the essay that we're also writing in class. And as far as virtual, basically my virtual teaching has just been, what do I do in class that's effective, and how can I get kids at home to see that even though they're virtual? So that's why you can see everything is just mimicked virtually, just like they would be doing in the class. And now that we have our hybrid model, I have some kids in the classroom and some kids still at home virtually. I'm just doing the same thing. Kids in class are seeing my notebook on the document camera. Kids at home are seeing my notebook on the document camera.
Wow.
So that's a little glimpse into virtual writing instruction with clarity.
Wow. Thank you so much, Shirley. That explanation you gave certainly makes it very clear about your process. So let's move on to our principal, Lauren. Let's have you tell us a little bit about your work at DeAnda Elementary. And then I have a question for you.
Sure, Shirley, thank you so much. So I am Lauren Melhoy, the proud principal of James DeAnda Elementary, which is in the South area of Houston. I have been here for 6 years. I was the AP for 2, and I'm embarking on my 4th year as a principal. And through the past 6 years, we've seen an absolute transformation of the teaching and learning that occurs on the campus. In 2015, we were significantly low performing and were identified as a priority campus. And through a variety of changes and updates and pushes, our team has really become just an excellent campus in terms of academic achievement, but it's also a campus that's really truly focused on kids and what's best for them. So that's a little about DeAnda.
All right, thank you. So tell us about the critical leadership moves that you make to ensure that teachers are supported to deliver instruction that fosters clarity for students.
Sure. Thank you so much. So at the beginning of DeAnda, when I came here with the team that we have, but also at the beginning of every year, it's really critical that we start off with your instructional focus. What is it that the principal and the leaders have as the vision of the school? And then how is that communicated consistently and regularly? The campus mission that we have at DeAnda, which is to foster critical thinkers and effective communicators, has been our mission since 2015, when we really embarked on our change journey. The mission and your vision needs to be clear for parents and staff. If I ask kids, why are we learning this? What are they learning? It's because they want to be citizens. They want to be agents of their learning to be able to make change. And another piece that we do is we leverage our high yield instructional capacities through our campus admin. Every single person on the administrative team is a very sound and solid instructional leader. But we also leverage our teacher leaders like Ms. Smith and Ms. LaRosa. They support campus teachers on a variety of levels because they have a different perspective and a different lens, and they're really in the work every day more than our administrative team. So Ms. LaRosa touched a little bit about the planning pieces that go in place. So planning after you have your instructional focus and your vision for the school, it's what do we really want kids to do? And for us, that ties back to our mission. We want our kids to be empowered scholars and to make decisions for themselves and to be agents of their learning, like I said. So we want to think not just your objective, but what is the underlying message of what we're teaching? So again, we want authentic learning and global citizen. An example I say is, we teach kids to summarize and to retell, but we want our students to be able to know why it's important to summarize or retell. What is the global significance for retelling when you're communicating, and why is that communication so essential to being a successful person? Ms. Loris also spoke to this as well with our pacing calendar. I've seen a lot of pacing calendars over the years, and those pacing calendars sometimes are just weekly glances. But we're very specific and intentional in what objective are we focusing on each day, and how is that logically sequenced to build up to mastery. So for example, when you're, and I think Ms. LaRosa mentioned this to me the other day, multiplying fractions, they need to know least common multiple first. And so how do we logically sequence those builds? And Ms. LaRosa also mentioned bringing in the factors that come into play during COVID. We're having to replan because of significant gaps of instruction for kids who weren't operating a significant amount of time virtually from March on, and then also regression. Even though we did teach virtually, we don't know the level of capacity that kids are currently at. So we're building regression safe measures and safeguards in to our daily pacing. And also it should make sense the way that things are logically sequenced. From our pacing calendar, we also go into our lesson planning, and we have our templates and structures provided with key elements. So very intentional of what is the teacher doing, but what is the student doing? And again, I'm going to reiterate, what is it in this lesson that we really want our students to do? Do we want them just to summarize and pick ABCD? Or do we want them explaining summary and the significance and why that would lead into another topic? The pictures that you see, the top one on the left is our teams, our math team leading together. Ms. LaRosa and our other math leader, Ms. Wynn, are leading our vertical alignment planning of best practices. So we're sharing how we vertically align our strategies. It's a day where we got substitute coverage for every math teacher, 2nd through 5th grade, and they just work together on pacing, planning, and best strategies. On the right in purple was one of our 3rd grade classrooms. They read the book Love. And after that, what she had them do is not just learn about the tone and the theme of the book Love, but also apply it to their lives and tell the theme of love in their own individual lives. And at the bottom, this was taken from Ms. LaRosa's math class, but it's a bridge map, again, using thinking maps, but they don't just show relationships through a bridge map, they're explaining why those relationships are significant. So how do you find the formulas of certain shapes? So again, lesson planning, we're continuing to do that with very specific methodologies with I do, we do, you do structure, but we also want to build upon gaining students' inquiry. And so we've actually regularly modify and update what our lesson plans can look like and how they can be exemplar. And we really want them to reflect, again, not just what the teacher is doing, but when we go in the classroom, what questions is the teacher asking, and what are these exemplar response that we want from kids? So really backwards planning. And then when we're planning as well, we also want to look at high yield resources. So an example is the book Enemy Pie. That book has a lot of options for teaching tools, but what is the real message that is given in Enemy Pie? Well, that's going to be a very big inferencing lesson. And so aligning our resources with instructional objectives that will get high yield results. And I know Ms. LaRosa mentioned this, but we did this a significant amount in our classroom is modeling and doing a lot of think alouds. So again, pre-planning, what are the questions that we want to ask, but then how do we impart and share our thinking with kids? And we continue to model, I would say even significantly more more amount now that we're virtual because we want to make sure that kids have those skills to be able to practice thinking from a teacher's lens and then practice independently. We, even throughout this pandemic, we've continued to have PLCs. We meet virtually with our teams, and any new instructional strategies we're trying or anything that we're trying to emphasize, we do at-bats. We practice and we'll say, hey, let's attack this, and then why don't we practice together virtually so we can work out kinks before we go live with our kids. And then teaching, we are very, very big on reflection and feedback, not just from a teacher perspective, but from kids. So if our students are learning summary today, we're going to ask them to reflect, how do you feel about summary? Do you feel you mastered the content, or what areas may you need more development on? Our feedback is pretty individualized. We have a significant amount of our instructional blocks with small groups or one-on-ones. And when we do that, there's always a mini lesson or a targeted lesson, but we want our students leaving with something that's actionable. If you are trying to sound out words and you're in, let's say first grade, and you're working on the ch sound, I'm going to give you a task that you're going to work on the ch sound and identify words in your book that would have letters that make that sound. What I want to point out for the pictures on the right, the very bottom is one of our virtual read alouds from one of our teachers. And if you notice, it's very tiny, but the bottom left is actually a Bitmoji character that has her pre-planned question on the screen. And so she just used some fun interactivity to be able to make sure that she has an effective lesson with questions that are scaffolded for her. And the top with the students, that was a fourth grade math lesson where kids were learning about symmetry. And we wanted to actually show them and have an actionable way to be able to manipulate, I forget the name of the paper, but it's a very special tracing paper. And on the right is summary, and that's a kindergarten classroom. And they were doing a sequence summary of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Okay, next slide, please. And this slide I'll go over very quickly, but clarity for us has been a transformation. When we were in 2015, where our school was low performing, we really brought it back to the basics. Let's do an I do, we do, you do gradual release structure. And it started out with saying, today, this is the objective and this is what we're going to teach. But the evolution that we've had is that we've had such success we've been able to build that we're now able to add a lot more inquiry and investment of, let's show you some examples and we'll have you draw out the learning from this. And then we as the teacher just narrow the scope and make sure that we have the specific learning and targeted intentions. And then trackers, we have all of our objectives for the year. So if I'm a fourth grader, I know these are all the objectives that I'm going to be learning for the year, and I'm going to track my mastery with that. I'm going to skip the filing cabinet content because I know I'm running over my time. But on the right, I do want to display just one of my proud principal moments. We had our fifth graders last year during Black History Month. We said, you know what, take a risk. Let's go away from objectives. And let's say, instead of saying this is what we're teaching today, this is what our objective was. What are human rights? How does the civil rights movement shaped our society today? And throughout a variety of lessons, our kids, and the bottom picture has it, our students got to choose what test they wanted to. And these boys wrote a script and performed a play on our civil rights movement and what it means to them today. And that was learning for them. It was very, very clear. So thank you, Shirley, and thank you for allowing me an opportunity to share some of Deanda's highlights. And just a quick shout out to all of the educators out there. Keep pushing during COVID. It's just been a challenge. And to any teacher and any administrator, thank you for the work that you are doing and continuing to do during this pandemic, because our kids need it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thanks to each of you. Your thoughtful responses to what happens in a great school is just an indication of what can be done when the expectation for equity and excellence is still a priority, even through a virtual environment. So now, audience, it's your turn. You've heard from our panelists. Now we'd like to hear from you. If you have questions, would you please type them in the chat box, and we'll respond to as many of your questions as we can. with the time that we have remaining.
So Shirley, we have one, which is how often do your teachers meet for planning and how long?
Okay. Lauren, sounds like a question for you.
Sure. So our guidelines are that within every 2 weeks, teachers get a minimum of 250 minutes of their own independent planning, but we build in extra time during their planning. So we meet with every grade level at a minimum of once a week for 55 minutes. But we've built a culture in this campus where we're really supportive. And so we say, let us know when you're planning and we want to come with you. So if there's a grade level that is choosing to plan together at 3:30 after school, we'll take the opportunity to go jump in with them. But at minimum, it's 55 minutes. But I know LaRosa and Ms. Smith could say that it's a significant more time that they spend together just voluntarily that's not required.
Thank you. And then another one is regarding parent involvement. Can you talk a little bit about your parent involvement?
Sure. So we have just really, really terrific families that want to be involved. We used to, back in 2015, there were 0 after-school programs except for tutorials. And so every year we've added more and more opportunities for not just our kids to be involved, but also our families as well. So we leverage pretty much any holiday that we can celebrate. We do a Veterans Day program and we invite parents, or we'll do muffins with mom or donuts with dad just to get them involved. And then I strategically, we have coffee with the principal, which is a meeting with me once a month just to impart information and to learn from our parents. But I'm strategically placing those around the times that we have parades. So around Halloween, when we have a book character parade, I have the meeting beforehand. And then the parents, if they come to the meeting, they'll stay for the parade. So just an opportunity for them to learn information about the school, but also leverage the opportunity for them to see their children in a fun environment.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Lauren, there is also a question around what did you mean by the 5th grade filing cabinet?
Sure. So I did gloss over that because I was out of time. But the 5th grade filing cabinet, I learned this in a training, and it's basically, if you look at all of the objectives for the school year from a kid lens and from a teacher lens, you can kind of compartmentalize into sections, whether it's units or themes. And I just always pick 5th grade science. And so there was a teacher I observed several years ago, and she had just a cardboard picture of a filing cabinet. And each of the files had a unit, and it said, this is life science, this is earth science, this is physical science. And throughout the year, as the children were learning objectives, she would actually take some tangible object and place it in the filing cabinet. And that way kids were starting to see connections for, all of these objectives were life science. It has to do with metamorphosis is life, but also food chain, food web, but also ecosystems. And so the kids were drawing connections about their learning, compartmentalized as if we're organizing and storing information in a way that makes sense for kids.
Thank you, Lauren. Just one more question and then we'll go on. So there's a curiosity about formative assessments. So if anyone can talk about types of formative assessments, that would be, and their use, that would be excellent.
I'd love to invite Ms. Smith and or Ms. LaRosa to share about formative assessments, because you guys do a great job.
So usually we have some district assessments that are given to us, but we definitely don't want to rely only on those because we want them to be very specific to what we're teaching in the classroom. So while we do have a combination of some more like traditional multiple choice standardized assessments, teachers are giving exit tickets all the time. For me, with grammar, what you saw in the notebook where the kids are writing their own sentences, that's something where I'm reading those every single day. So maybe I can notice like, okay, the student really understood this piece as far as an exit ticket. So like I understand that the student understood the content today, but I also am noticing what they don't know so that I can plan future lessons if I see that, they don't understand the correct use of apostrophes or something. I can plan that in the future. And then just informally, any type of writing that a student does is an assessment and a piece of information for me as a teacher to plan for the future. And then grade level wise, we usually do a lot of planning to decide what more formal format assessments we will have generally each week.
Okay, for math, we usually do half computational skill and half story problems or word problems. But once or twice a week, we give them open-ended questions like finding errors or multi-step problem where they apply the lessons that they have taken during the week. So it's like that. But we give immediate feedback on how they are doing. So the teacher comments is so important.
All right. Well, thank you, all of you, so very much. And it's certainly a testament to the Gold Award that you have received by what you've described about your work today. We invite our observers to continue to put questions in the chat box. And if your question wasn't asked, we'll be looking at those and trying to get responses to you. So Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you to finish with our webinar.
Thanks, Shirley. So if you didn't get a chance to answer your question today, our panelists have graciously shared their contact information, which is on the copy of the slide deck, or you can reach out to us at incust@sdsu.edu, and we'll direct your question appropriately. You know, it's clear from our wonderful panel from DeAnda that students don't just acquire clarity by accident. Clarity is carefully, even meticulously planned. And in distance learning situations, it's more important than ever to ensure that teachers are working together to plan for clarity. And so I just want to thank our DeAnda team for giving us a window into what they're doing to help ensure such high levels of success for the students that they serve in Houston. We'd like to remind everyone that we are developing sessions that focus on each of the teaching practices highlighted in Teaching Practices from America's Best Urban Schools. And we are in each of these sessions emphasizing how teachers can utilize those practices in distance learning contexts. So please visit us at incust.com to see recordings of the sessions that have aired previously, as well as new sessions that will become available in the weeks and months ahead. These sessions are for you, and we'd like to make sure we're providing content in a way that serves you. To help us do that, please complete the survey that will be emailed to you at the end of the session. I want to thank our InQust team, including our executive coaches, Dr. Ruby Boyd and Dr. Shirley Peterson, who you met today, as well as other of our executive coaches, as well as our InQust staff working behind the scenes to make all of this available to you. And I want to especially thank our wonderful panelists from DeAnda Elementary, Lauren Melhoy, the principal, Jacqueline LaRosa, and Hillary Smith, amazing teachers from DeAnda. Thank you so much for sharing your time and valuable insights today. And I also want to thank everyone in our audience. We know that you have many, many things to do, and we're just honored that you've taken the time to join us for this event. We hope that this series is useful to you as you redefine classroom instruction to ensure equity and excellence for all of your students, especially in the context of remote learning. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great day.